starting on, are tariffs being delayed from March 4th to April 2nd?
Listen, we act on the basis of signed documents by, the executive orders that would be issued. As you know, we're following that very carefully, but we'll see, One thing we have learned is to take it step by step, to listen to what the president says very carefully, but at the same time, the only way you can operate like that is to make sure that you act on the basis of signed executive orders so that you know exactly the rules and the details. So our mission is still to seek that we don't apply the tariff. That's certainly our mission number one, to have an extension on suspension so that we can have dialogue with our U.S. friends. Because I think we have said loud and clear in our American voice. You saw the CEO of Alcoa yesterday say, tariffs would have a tremendous impact on U.S. jobs. I think he said 100,000 jobs. You had the CEO of Ford who said that would be chaos and cost. So I think, the best way forward is to make sure that we make North America more resilient, more competitive, and that we maintain these critical supply chains, because that's how we can provide affordability to consumers and resiliency for both our nations. So our mission is still to avoid the tariff, extend the suspension if we need to, and prepare in the case that there would be. As you know, Canadians know, Prime Minister has been very clear, we are prepared, and there'll be a targeted, strategic, but a firm response, because
These
that's the best.
24th tariffs are still on.
Listen, we'll have to see. There's a lot of speculation, so I won't speculate. We'll work on the basis of what we see in the executive orders.
Monsieur Champagne, vous appuyez Monsieur Carney.
Oui, effectivement.
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez du fait qu'il a recommandé le déménagement du siège social de Brookfield Asset Management vers les États-Unis?
Écoutez, moi, je travaille avec M. Carney parce que c'est lui qui a la meilleure vision économique. Dans son rôle comme candidat à la direction du Parti libéral du Canada, on a cette vision-là d'un Canada résilient, un Canada fort, un Canada qui va avoir une présence économique. On va attirer des investissements. Vous allez voir, je vais annoncer des investissements importants cette semaine. Donc, avec Marc, et je pense ensemble, en équipe, on va être capable justement d'attirer des investissements, de faire du Canada un endroit par excellence pour investir, rassurer les investisseurs, ramener la confiance. Bon, mais écoutez, c'est ça. Moi, je parle de ce qu'il fait, mais présentement, il se présente comme chef du Parti libéral du Canada. Puis c'est comme ça qu'on va travailler, faire un Canada plus résilient, plus ambitieux. Et je pense que c'est la bonne personne. Il a su rassurer les gens avec un discours posé, mais rassurant pour l'avenir.
Un drôle de message.
Écoutez, moi, je pense que vous avez vu, on attire des investissements. Vous allez voir cette semaine, suivez-moi, j'en ai pour des milliards annoncés cette semaine. Bien, cette semaine, il reste 2 jours. La semaine prochaine, on a des milliards d'investissements annoncés. Les gens voient qu'on a ce qu'il faut. On a les talents, on a des écosystèmes industriels forts, on a des minéraux critiques, on a l'énergie renouvelable, on a l'accès au marché. Moi, je peux vous dire que ça va rassurer les investisseurs qu'on soit capable d'attirer des investissements.
President Trump again brought up today that if Canada can't subsist without American trade, it should just become a 51st state. Is that kind of rhetoric making it difficult to have these negotiations to delay the tariffs?
Well, on one end, you have the rhetoric, and the other end, you have the industrial reality. There's a reasons why you have the aluminum smelters in Canada. There's a reason why you have steel smelters in Canada. We have the best workers. We have the energy. We have the know-how to do that, and therefore the supply chain are more integrated, are the more integrated that you find in the world. So we are interdependent, despite what may be said. The reality on the ground, when you talk to the CEOs, when you talk to the small and medium-sized businesses who have been doing trade for more than a century, they would say that it's essential. We are the largest customer to the United States. That's what I say when I go to. I hope you're happy to see me, because we buy more from them than China, Japan, the UK, and France combined. So this is a fact we should never lose sight. You never go to Washington looking down or elbows down. You go and you say up. We are a big country. We're a G7 country. We're a large economy. I can tell you, I even had U.S. companies that said we're thinking about coming to Canada now, because if there would be issues around the border, we want to make sure we can sell. This is a 41 million population. It's a big country, big market for a number of goods, and therefore, and we always remind our American friends that they have a trade surplus with Canada if you exclude energy. So we're in a strong position. We have to be confident. We have to be resilient, and we're going to invest in Canada.
Are those messages getting to President Trump?
Well, we need to double double down. You know, that's the thing in Washington. There's a lot of things going on. I always say there's very few people who wake up in the morning thinking about Canada, so you need to repeat. There's a lot of things happening, but you hear voices. You heard the CEO of Alcoa said, you know, that would cost like, I think, 100,000 jobs. You had the CEO of Ford, that would bring chaos and cost to the supply chain. So I think what we want is to make North America more resilient, more competitive, and bring growth. And the way to do it, Canada is not the problem. Canada is part of the solution, and that's what we're going to be advocating with our friends in Washington. Merci, il faut juste aller aux toilettes. Donnez-moi
Vous allez repasser, c'est ça?
Non, il faut que je m'en aille aux
On
toilettes.
vous prend sur votre tour, c'est correct.
OK, j'en reviens.
On vous attend.
Je vais prendre votre question. C'est d'autres côtés.
Génial.
Excuse.
Je me demandais juste si vous pensez que M. Carney devrait faire une déclaration éthique de ses conflits d'intérêts de façon proactive, un peu pour rassurer les Canadiens, peut-être évacuer le bruit entourant des conflits d'intérêts possibles qui présentement servent aux conservateurs.
Écoutez, tout sera fait dans le bon ordre au bon moment. Moi, je pense que là, présentement, on est dans une course au leadership. Je pense qu'il a bien fait dans les débats. Un ton rassurant, un message ambitieux, un message confiant. Puis le reste, écoutez, c'est sûr que j'ai toute la confiance qu'il va faire les choses au bon moment. C'est normal dans ce processus-là, mais là, on est encore dans cette course-là au leadership. Et vous savez, il y a beaucoup de choses. Ben, écoutez, selon les règles, moi, les choses vont se passer au bon moment, mais là, ce que les gens ont besoin, c'est d'être rassurés, d'avoir un plan pour l'avenir, puis de bâtir un Canada.
Parlant de rassurer les Canadiens, il n'a pas
Bernie
induit les Canadiens en erreur. Monsieur Mitterrand, vous appuyez Mark Carney. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez du fait qu'il a recommandé le déménagement du siège social de Brookfield Asset Management?
J'ai vu qu'il se passait quelque chose, mais j'ai pas tous les faits, donc... ouais.
Et donc, vous êtes pas informé là-dessus? Vous ne trouvez pas qu'il a peut-être induit les Canadiens en erreur là, hier soir, après le débat?
Je connais pas les faits assez pour pouvoir
What kind of
commenter.
clarity
your
has
understanding
Canada
of-
received about when the tariffs are going to come in?
Well, I'm sure you all follow the news. We're following it as closely as possible. We obviously see the various declarations coming out of the U.S. We're preparing for all scenarios.
And
So
what
the
has
March
it- has he-
4th tariffs are still on, as far as you're concerned.
Well, that appears to not be what he said today, but we'll see.
Well, he also said they could be ongoing, but then April 2nd might be something else. Like,
So we're going to wait till something happens, something's on paper, but in any scenario, Canadians should be very reassured that the government's prepared.
How confident are you that you
How
can
difficult
delay?
is it to manage this file right now and to deal with this when you consider that it seems like either you're watching TV to see what he says or that you don't even know where it's coming from?
It is clear that, there seems to be a blistering amount of new policy, but policy is not policy until it's enacted, and when Canada sees policy enacted, then we'll react, and we're prepared for all the scenarios.
That's the last question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, Minister, you guys are on holidays. Do we want to explore more LNG? Is that kind of the flavor and the feeling right now?
Well, I mean, look, we've been working on liquid natural gas exports for the past number of years. As you probably know, LNG Canada 1 will come on stream in the next couple of months. Woodfibre is under construction. Cedar has gone through its FID. There's obviously lots of conversations about LNG Canada 2. If you take all of those as one, that's half the gas that we export to the United States right now. So we're looking at diversification options. It's important that we do that in the current environment.
What about on the East Coast?
On the East Coast, look, we looked very hard at this. I worked with the CEO of TC Energy, the CEO of Repsol, on the idea of refitting that LNG import facility to become an export facility. The challenge was you've got to ship gas from Alberta all the way to New Brunswick, and you have to upgrade the infrastructure for what is a relatively modest amount of gas. When the company did the work on that, they came to the conclusion they would have to charge a price for the gas that would exceed what folks can get elsewhere. So, when Mr. Poilievre makes this sort of complaint about East Coast, I actually would invite Mr. Poilievre just to look at the economics. And to be honest with you, it's another example of the fact that Mr. Poilievre doesn't actually understand how business works.
Monsieur
What do you
Wilkinson,
make
vous
of-
appuyez Mark Carney. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez du fait qu'il a recommandé le déménagement du siège social de Brookfield Asset Management vers les États-Unis quand il était président du CA?
Oui, je soutiens Mark Carney. Il est quelqu'un qui a beaucoup d'expérience dans le secteur de l'économie et il est quelqu'un que je crois va être un très bon choix pour le Premier ministre du Canada. Mais pour cette question, je crois que vous devez demander à M. Carney.
Vous pouvez pas que ça
Do
envoie un
you
drôle
think
de
he needs to come
message?
clean on the Brookfield move, though?
What I would say is, irrespective of this particular instance, anyone who knows anything about business knows that boards actually have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. I wasn't in the room. I don't know what the conversations were. But I know Mr. Carney is a man of very high ethics. At the end of the day, his job as a chairman of a board is to act in the best interests of shareholders. I'm sure he did that, but in terms of the specifics, you've got to ask Mr. Carney.
C'est ce que Trump voulait, M. Wilkinson. Attirer les entreprises canadiennes aux États-Unis, c'est ce que Trump voulait. C'est ce que M. Carney avec Brookfield a fait.
Comme j'ai déjà dit, c'est important d'avoir cette conversation avec M. Carney, mais je sais qu'il est quelqu'un qui est très engagé avec l'idée du Canada, et je suis sûr qu'il a fait les choses qui sont très importantes pour la compagnie et pour les gens qui sont les propriétaires de cette compagnie.
Canada when President Trump says that he doesn't need our oil?
Pardon me?
Does it hurt Canada when President Trump says that he doesn't need our oil?
Look, I mean, President Trump has said a lot of things, and with due respect, there are certain things that he said that probably are not fully founded on the facts. At this point in time, the Americans produce 13.5 million barrels a day of oil, light sweet crude. They actually use 16.5 million barrels of oil. What we provide to them is not only the gap between those two numbers, but we provide heavy crude, which is way more cost effective for them to refine. Their refineries are set up in the Midwest and the Gulf Coast to use heavy crudes. ExxonMobil just refitted one refinery to use light sweet crudes. It took 4 years. It cost $4 billion. So when he says he doesn't need the oil, I think he needs to actually sit down and look at those issues. I had a meeting with the Secretary of Energy from the United States last week. I think he very much understands that. He's somebody who actually understands Canada well, and I expect that I will be seeing him in Houston 2 weeks from now. We'll have another conversation about that.
What's your understanding of when tariffs are coming? Because Trump said today that tariffs are coming on Mexico and Canada on April 2nd now. Are tariffs being delayed from March 4th?
Well, there's been a number of dates that have been put forward with different rationales. I think the early March date was focused, or at least many in his administration have said, is focused primarily on the border. At the end of the day, I have been going to Washington, as have a number of my colleagues, and I will be there next week again, to make the argument that tariffs actually are going to cause significant damage to the United States, and are going to raise the prices of groceries, gasoline, home heating, electricity, for Americans in many parts of the country. That's not a good thing for the United States, and it's certainly not a good thing for Canada. I don't think tariffs are a foregone conclusion, but we need to continue to have the conversation with them, and that's why I'm going down there again next week. So thank you.
It's possible that these are still coming on March 4th?
I wouldn't want to make the decision from President Trump. At the end of the day, he has obviously is the final decision maker, but we are working very hard to ensure that they are not put into place.
Finally, we heard from Jagmeet Singh. He said that Trump should not be invited to the G7 because, look, he's calling for Canada to become part of the U.S. Do you think he should be there?
Look, President Trump obviously has said a number of things that have made Canadians, that have offended Canadians, that made many Canadians very angry. I have been very offended, and I have been quite angry about some of the things that he has said. But at the end of the day, we need to find pathways to work with the Americans. We are not going to sort of cut ourselves off and float into the ocean. They are going to be our neighbors going forward. And we need to find pathways to have better conversations than what we're having right now. That is what we are endeavoring to do. I don't think that simply trying to throw the president out of the G7 is a particularly constructive approach. But unfortunately, Mr. Singh has been throwing out all kinds of ideas that, to be honest with you, make very little sense. It's like when he said that we should cut off cobalt exports to the United States. Cobalt and lithium. We almost export none of both of those things. Like, at the end of the day, he needs to perhaps find new advisors who can actually provide something more thoughtful for him to say.
Thank you.
You guys are the real fighters, staying here. It's good.
And thank you for stopping and chatting with us. Can I ask
Always.
you a quick question about the tariffs?
Yes.
Is it your understanding the March 4th tariffs have been delayed?
Well, listen, I'm not going to speculate because one thing that we have learned is to work on the basis of facts. And when we acted, as you've seen, is always on the basis of the signed executive orders. The first order of business, as you know, is to prevent the tariff. alternatively to seek the suspension, and if there were tariffs down the road, to have a robust response. And I think this is well understood by our colleagues in Washington. So, for now, we're just, we're doubling down, because one thing people need to understand, and that's where we need to focus, is that the president has always been very clear that the imposition of tariffs on the 4th of March was related to the border and fentanyl. And I think there is an understanding that we have doubled down on our efforts for our own sake to make sure that there's zero fentanyl that is crossing the border, and that we work together to control illegal immigration. So I think Canada is prepared to do its part, and I think this is well understood by our colleagues in Washington, and we'll continue to make that point.
So, but what is your understanding about Trump's comments this morning? He was talking about April 2nd.
The president, you always have to be mindful to what the president says and take it seriously, but I must say I've not seen his latest comments on that. But we have 2 ministers in Washington with our fentanyl czar. They're meeting with their counterparts. They're making the case for Canada. Canada is not the problem. Canada is part of the solution. And Canada is a key member to make sure, a key partner to make sure that we secure the border, that we stop illegal immigration, and we make North America safer. This is in Canada's best interest, and we're going to work with our American partners.
Sir, just one more if you have time. With regards to the U.S. deal that signed with the Ukraine today on critical minerals, we heard the Prime Minister a couple of weeks ago say that one of Mr. Trump's reasons for wanting to get into Canada was critical minerals. The deal today between the U.S. and Ukraine, does that alleviate any pressure on Canada as far as...
I've not seen the details, but I would say if you talk to the manufacturers, the key word is proximity. Proximity to resources, market, and assembly line. And I would say in that sense, Canada is the partner of choice when it comes to critical minerals, because that's what you would hear from the manufacturers. They want proximity, and that's what Canada can offer. So we're going to be continuing to work to make our supply chain very resilient. Thank you. Merci.
Do you have a question, please? Sure. Just with regards to all the tariff talk, one thing I want to ask you was, in regards to some of the responses we get into wildfire season, would holding back some aid to the U.S. with regards to that be on the table as far as any negotiations?
Listen, when it comes to emergencies and people's lives are at risk, no, we don't. Wouldn't even think about that. The U.S. is always here for us when it comes to emergency management support, and that will always continue.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.